I did my paper on police, rehabilitation, and juveniles. It was broken down into 5 parts: an overview of rehab, criminological theories, perceptions of juvenile rehab, a call for more research, and a police training proposal. Part 1 was an overview of rehabilitation. The first juvenile court was founded in 1899 in Cook County, Illinois. The idea was that juveniles were different from adults and they should be treated differently. In the early 2000s, research was done to see if rehabilitation reduced recidivism. The research showed report for rehabilitation and its effectiveness at reducing recidivism. The main purpose of rehabilitation is to assist the juvenile in re-entering society and lessen recidivism. In some cases, it can give juveniles access to things such as job training or work programs. A variety of rehabilitation programs for juveniles exist. Group therapy, that's when the therapist listens to a group of juveniles. Group housing gives juveniles a place to go before being released or entered back into society. In family therapy, the family members are part of the juvenile's rehabilitation, and in this case, the juvenile gets a chance to be rehabilitated along with the family, so the whole family gets a chance to make better connections with one another. So these types of rehabilitation or work programs could possibly give other means of achieving success or outlets besides criminal activity. They say that juveniles are younger and worth saving, therefore leaving the assumption that rehabilitation is important for juveniles since they're younger. They can be swayed from their criminal activity with proper intervention. So rehabilitating juveniles can hopefully help them to become better members of society. If juveniles are willing to change, they can be better rehabilitated. In early models of rehabilitation, only juveniles who are seen as good candidates were allowed into rehabilitation programs. Many states have wavered on rehabilitation and have leaned more towards a rehabilitation model or a tougher punishment model. Some states, such as Texas, have changed its view. Their juvenile system started off with a rehabilitative model, then they went to a more tough on crime approach, and then they soon went back to leaning towards a rehabilitative model. Their current policy looks at what made a juvenile commit crime in the first place. The rehabilitation of juveniles and the juvenile justice system model are not without its critics, but for the most part, it seems that rehabilitation is supported for juveniles. In part 2, I talked about criminological theories that have to do with rehabilitation. I looked at the control theory, self-control theory, the social bonds theory, and the labeling theory. Control theory was meant to ask why people do not commit crime, not so much as why people do commit crime. Reese and Nye's theory of internal and external control explains how socialization teaches a person to have control over their behavior. There were 3 types of control: internal controls, direct controls, and indirect controls. Direct control is when a person is directly awarded or punished for their behavior. Indirect control is when a person does not engage in a delinquent act. They don't want to cause disappointment to the people they care for. That's why they don't engage in it. Internal control is when a young person's own thought process keeps them from engaging in delinquent crime. Reese and I discussed that the importance of the internal and direct controls. They're important when it comes to family. Young children need more care, affection, and attention, and this will keep direct controls from having to be imposed on them. And Travis Hershey wrote on the social bonds theory, and he still remains a major control theorist today. He bases his social bonding theory on the fact that crime is committed when the bond to society is poor, weak, or broken. There are four main parts that make up the bond to society. They are attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. Attachment to others is when a person cares about the expectations of the people that they are close to or look up to. When we don't care about the opinions of other people and what they think, we're more likely to engage in crime. In general, attachment is related to less crime. Commitment refers to a person who has been committed to conforming to social norms. They have something to lose when they stop conforming. Involvement is described as how involved the juvenile is in life. So when a juvenile is busy with family, friends, school activities, sports, and things of that nature, they don't have enough time to engage in crime. The final major part of social bonding theory is belief. Belief is when a person believes in the laws, values, and morals of society. When a person commits crime, it's because they have allowed those beliefs and views to be weakened in some way. There has been empirical support for Hershey's theory of social bonding. Research has shown support for his theory overall. He found in his own studies that weaker bonds do tend to lead to a higher chance of crime. Self-control theory is another theory that discusses why delinquents may engage in criminal acts. Hershey joined with Michael Gottfredson and proposed a theory of crime that deals with just self-control. Self-control explains all reasons why people engage in delinquent acts, or so it was meant to do. When they find themselves in a situation to commit delinquent acts, they can avoid them or not. Low self-control can lead to crime when the opportunity to commit crime presents itself. Low self-control is determined by the lack of socialization and the way parents raise their children. Also, I looked at the labeling theory. I found labeling theory could give an explanation for why juveniles act the way they do when approached by police. Formal and informal labels placed on individuals is what can cause juveniles to commit crime. Juveniles who have contact with the law have a greater chance of committing delinquent acts, and juveniles receive nonverbal indications through society of what other people think of them. The third part that I wrote on was perceptions of juvenile rehabilitation. There are various views of rehabilitation from different people: the public, student views, judges, attorneys, and correctional personnel. The views of the public on juvenile rehabilitation. There was a study done in Pennsylvania. They sent out a questionnaire to a group of people from Pennsylvania. They followed up with questions on rehabilitation and punishment. They asked them questions regarding money, if they would be willing to pay for rehabilitation for juveniles or not. Participants indicated that they would rather pay for rehabilitation and early intervention programs for young juveniles. And overall, most people in the public did view rehabilitation as a good thing. I also looked at students. There was a study done on criminal justice students and their views of rehabilitation or punishment. The students say that they believe that there is more need for reform in the juvenile justice system. They watched firsthand accounts of juveniles who had gone through the criminal justice system and got to see what those juveniles felt of the system. And after all was said and done, they felt that the juveniles definitely would have been better off going through a rehabilitation program instead of being punished. Juvenile justice workers, judges, and juvenile justice practitioners all favored rehabilitation more strongly over other types of punishment. I also looked at juveniles themselves who had gone through the criminal justice system as children and what they thought of the system and how it works. They mostly felt that it was unfair, the courtroom process was unfair, and the placement didn't really do them any good. In the courtroom, they had no idea what was going on, and they just agreed without having any idea of how it affected their life. The police were seen as being unfair and harassing to them when they felt that they had no need to be. And in terms of their placement, they felt that they were too young to utilize what they were even learning, or they would rather be at the place where they were at instead of going back to their house. Part 4 was on a call for research on police perceptions. Not much has been done on what police think of juveniles in rehabilitation. Research has been done on what other people think in the juvenile justice system of rehabilitation, but not much has been done on police officers. And studies have shown that police contact does give a negative perception to juveniles. Part 5 was on police training proposals. More education would be a good idea. One study by Minor Romanoff showed that criminal justice students still don't have a good idea fully of what the juvenile justice system is actually like. One thing implemented in a state was the TAPS Academy, Teen and Police Service Academy. It was shown to reduce the divide between youth and police. After attending the academy, African American youth admitted to feeling closer to officers and having a better view of them. Another study was done where officers engaged with the youth in different types of activities. The juveniles' attitudes towards police got much better. They didn't find a huge difference in the officers' views, but the study suggests that was mainly due to the fact that officers already had a good feeling about working with juveniles, that they were going to enjoy it. So that's why their views did not change much, because they already were kind of excited about the program. So basically, early intervention with young children should be done. They need a positive early experience with officers. So I think some more programs like the TAPS Academy and more education would probably help the views of officers on juveniles and vice versa.